It's time for Positively Kansas. Coming up, it almost faced the wrecking ball, but now the Kingman Theater has reached an epic milestone and is still going strong. Learn about the important place this historic venue plays in the life of the town. Also, it seems like such a simple idea, but what a difference it's made. See how a public art project has brought townfolk together and added some extra flair to this small Kansas community. Plus, we'll meet up with this retired couple from down under who've made Kansas their second home. The reason? They love chasing storms. I'm Sierra Scott. Those stories are cute and ready to roll in this edition of Positively Kansas.
Positively Kansas is brought to you in part by...
Before investing your hard-earned money, make sure your financial advisor understands your objectives. Mark Douglas, CFP, serving our community for over 20 years, providing customized financial solutions that focus on the individual.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas serves more than 930,000 Kansans in various programs. Independent, member-owned. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas, an independent licensee of Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association, supports KPTS.
Program support provided by the F. Price Kosman Memorial Trust, Entrust Bank trustee, bringing you the Kansas Wild Edge segments on Positively Kansas.
They've become endangered species across small-town America. The local movie theater was once the only place for entertainment in a lot of communities, and they were thriving enterprises. But that changed over the years, and many went by the wayside. Not in Kingman, though, where the theater has reached an epic milestone. Anthony Powell paid a visit.
Since 1920, this beautiful theater has stood high above Main Street, providing generations with good old-fashioned family entertainment. So much in life has changed over the last century, but the theater has stayed much the same, closing only a few months in 100 years for minor renovations and upgrades.
I think it's probably the life of Kingman.
Lifelong Kingman resident Dina Lampe is the theater's general manager. As you might imagine, she wears a lot of hats, including getting the movie started for the Friday through Sunday showings.
It's the first actual theater that had an open balcony. There's no steel beams, there's nothing. And so if you walk into the balcony, it actually gives a little bit of a bounce because it was a freestanding balcony.
And of course, it is the theater's history that makes it such a special place to not only see a movie, but also just to look around.
So when my grandma tells me that she was able to come and I'm walking in these same doors with my daughter, it all comes full circle of the history that's here in these walls, what it meant to the community, and why we're still here.
Dina Lampe and concessions manager Amanda Cousins are the only paid employees. Dozens of volunteers also help keep things running smoothly. Amanda says she loves serving up tasty treats like the theater's legendary popcorn.
Yeah, we have some regulars that come in, and as soon as they are buying their tickets, I have their order ready before they even get up to the concession stands.
Regulars like Mary Lannon, who has been coming here for nearly 50 years.
For one thing, they make wonderful popcorn, and it's interaction with other people. And I watch movies a lot at home too, but this is different. And I get to giggle, and they know the whole place is laughing because Mary's laughing.
I think it says that the community rallies around us. I think it says that they're going to support us because we support the community by staying open with our hard work and dedication.
Serving this tight-knit community since the year 1920. And the way this iconic theater has stood the test of time, folks around here say they wouldn't be surprised at all if the theater was still standing tall in the year 2120. In Kingman, for Positively Kansas, I'm Anthony Powell.
In addition to providing entertainment to Kingman residents, folks from many nearby towns like Cheney, Garden Plain, and others love catching a movie at the theater. They say it's an experience you just won't find anyplace else. In one Kansas community, the mayor found a way to get many of the citizens, young and old, to get out and paint the town red, blue, green, yellow, every color in the book. Actually, as Chris Frank shows us, they painted the fire hydrants, turning each one into a work of art.
Fire hydrants are so common in Kansas neighborhoods, they typically go unnoticed. But the fire hydrants in the town of Keachai are anything but typical. What are generally meant to only catch the eyes of firefighters during a fire are now commanding looks from everyone else.
Oh, that looks awesome.
Karen Michler is pleased to see how the hydrant in her front yard is being painted, saying it's turning out better than she expected. 12-year-old Amaya Hernandez painted this hydrant with the nurse's uniform theme to honor nurses. That means a lot to Michler.
Well, both of my kids are ICU nurses. My mom was an ER nurse and my sister is an oncology nurse, so I think that's a nice tribute to them. I love it. Did you do that?
Yeah.
It's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
The themes for the hydrant paintings are extensive, and the involvement can range from a collaboration of 1 to 2 up to a large group or family efforts.
It's just really fun, and it just gives, it just like makes it fun for like people that are come here and like visitors and stuff.
Parents look on with pride seeing their child's work.
She sure loves it.
She loves it, and she's amazing with her hands. She's got a very artistic eye.
There's no getting around the fact that the idea for this hydrant painting came about after the COVID-19 stay-at-home order was made.
Well, we had a lot of people that were home with the COVID-19 virus, and I thought, let's get our citizens involved and we can make these fire hydrants look great. And I tell you, it surpassed what I ever thought it would be.
There we go.
Spear says there was no shortage of volunteers applying to paint these. He says it's been a great way to pull people together in a community spirit.
It was a great family activity.
It's so windy out here.
15-year-old Cheyenne Hoover is having a challenge painting a sign for this hydrant. With it being on the edge of town, there's little to block the wind blowing the spray paint.
The hydrant that we painted is a little bit lower down to the ground. You kind of can't see it coming from one direction, and so
Hoover says Mayor Spear had the idea of them putting up an attention-grabbing sign. He suggested a phrase playing off a 1960s hippie saying, "Far out, man."
Far out, man.
But he said back in the 60s, they said, "Far out, man."
Far out, man.
And so it's a fire hydrant. Why not do fire out, man? So I said, you know what? You get me something to paint on and I will make it happen.
Far out, man.
I think it's a fun experience for anybody, and especially while everybody's cooped up at home, it's a fun time to be able to do something out of the ordinary for people just to have fun.
Families like the Turners here got an application from City Hall to paint a hydrant. They went to work immediately once approved.
We're painting the Hulk for my boys. Both my boys loved the Hulk when they were younger. And so when we saw the fire hydrants painted around town, we were like, we want to do one, and we couldn't think of what we were going to do. And I came up with Hulk because I didn't see any superheroes. And the only thing that's different about ours is that it has teal hair. My aunt is battling ovarian cancer, and that's the color of the ribbon for that. So we decided to do that to support ovarian cancer.
10-year-old Jaden Turner enjoys the chance to get out of the house during the pandemic and have what he calls a fun experience of painting the hydrant in a theme supporting his favorite superhero, the Hulk. Tell me about the Hulk.
He's strong. He's sometimes nice and sometimes mean.
I love it. I think it's something creative for the kids and for the people of Keachai. And every time we drive by, we can say, hey, we did that.
Lonnie Rote says her family wanted to make this hydrant in a happy and fun theme.
We are doing a really bright, happy one. We are calling Pink and a Wink. We're doing the bright pink color, and the front of it, we're making a little wink, so when people drive by, they take a second look.
Rote says she and the children did online research to get ideas. She figures firefighters will have no trouble spotting this hydrant.
I like that it's a way to get out of the house right now, and that it adds character to Keachai.
These girls say getting outdoors was a relief after being cooped up during the stay-at-home period.
Because we're stuck inside and we need fresh air.
Normally, when it's time to paint the hydrants, it's something the fire department does. It's not something these kids and their parents have experience with.
It's not that hard. Once you get an idea and you just go with it, it's pretty easy.
The painting of this fire hydrant is another whole family endeavor. Keachai Police Lieutenant Joseph Trumball has been on duty most of the time, while wife Rachel and daughters Zoe and Liliana have been painting. But on this day, they left an emoji for Dad to paint.
I haven't really seen Daddy paint, like,
okay, so what am I doing?
Close up. Then you do, like,
Triangle?
He's painting a face of a first responder. Now come on now, use your imagination and you can see that.
Triangle.
That way? Yeah.
There's no escaping the impact the stay-at-home order is having, even on these young children.
Like before all of this corona stuff happened, I wasn't really painting at all.
It gives them something to do outside of the home. So with this, they've been kind of struggling with not being able to get out and do some of the things they used to be able to do.
High five!
And just when I thought I was going to escape town without getting paint on my body or clothes, this 9-year-old girl says,
You paint one.
the fire department asked the folks in Keachai if they paint these fire hydrants, at least make sure that they show up well for the firefighters. Can you imagine any of these not being very visible to a firefighter? I don't think so.
This one is a K-State theme, so it fits well for us K-State students.
This is the fourth hydrant these identical twins, Haley and Madison Nadier, have painted.
So it's been nice to have a break and be creative and get to choose our own designs and see people really liking what we've done, and yeah, we've really enjoyed it.
The hydrant stands in Carrie Moore's front yard. She's impressed with the work.
I just love when you hear stories, all these feeling good stories that have come about during this time, and people giving their talent and their time to make things special and put bright spots. There's always good that comes.
It's a lot of fun to do something for the community. It's really cool to think that in 10 years, driving down the street, it'll still be there, kind of leaving our legacy on Keachai during this kind of crazy time, and when it's difficult to, you know, kind of have hope. This adds lots of fun to the community.
Their first hydrant had an M&M design, the second was a firehouse design, and the third has a Keachai logo.
I love things like this, I really do.
Now, Keachai isn't a large community, but it still has dozens of fire hydrants. You can take a look at some of the designs the painters came up with. This is a positive project birthed during a time many feared the spread of a coronavirus.
And this is one of those things that will live on for years here in Keachai.
Live on, he says, hopefully long after a virus called COVID-19 forced so many of these painters to stay at home.
That is great.
In Keachai, for Positively Kansas, this is Chris Frank.
Mayor Spears says he actually borrowed the idea from Valley Center, which did something similar. He says 95 Keachai citizens participated in the project. Kansas is well known around the world for its dramatic and dangerous weather. Each spring, the tension mounts as treacherous storms bear down. This annual threat of severe weather is now making our state a destination for people fascinated by the wrath of Mother Nature. Jim Grayway has the story of a husband and wife from Australia who bought a home in Kansas just so they could chase storms all spring.
The spectacle, the danger.
Look how quick that dust is going up.
The drama.
We report a tornado on the ground. Large.
This is the epic reality of Kansas weather. And right in the middle of it all, you'll find Clive and Jane Herbert.
The storms here, the dynamics
work so quickly.
They may be from down under, but their fascination lies up above Tornado Alley.
Once you've chased storms in America, you have to come back and do it again and again.
Holy sh**. Check that out.
Their addiction to the awe and mayhem drove the Herberts to buy a house in central Kansas. They move here each spring and wait for Mother Nature to flip her lid.
There's no place on the planet where you get storms like you get here.
Look at the vortices on the ground.
We just go where the weather takes us. So we come over here in mid-February most years. We go to one of the conferences, Chase the Con, and that starts our season. And then we chase the snow and we chase the frost for a couple of months, and then the storms start.
Check that out.
One memorable adventure that sticks out is this one in western Kansas, the year 2013.
There were thousands of tumbleweeds suddenly came out of the southwest and covered us up completely. The video is fantastic. It's the weirdest thing we ever saw in a supercell thunderstorm was the attack of the killer tumbleweeds.
From their home in Hillsboro, Clive and Jane continually scour the forecast. And if there's a chance of an outbreak anywhere in the middle U.S., they pack up and hit the road.
What we have here is our Davis weather instrument. That's a vantage view. That's one of the most robust weather stations you can get. That's been through hailstorms and tornadoes. Our stuff is already loaded in the vehicle, our camera gear. Jane takes care of all the technical aspect. Jane's a wizard at technical stuff. And in the front here, we've got our setup for the computer. I know the sun's shining on it. And Jane sets all that up with the different software so we get live radar.
Their technology is the latest, but their fascination with storms is as old as they are.
We were just born like that.
We get called weather people. We are just, I don't know why, we're all born with something of interest. Even you were born with something that interests you all your life.
I met up with a friend about 10 years ago that I'd gone to school with in elementary school. And her first question to me was, do you still do what you used to do in 4th grade? And I said, what was that? And she said, if there was a storm around, you had your nose on the window, you couldn't hear anyone, you couldn't even hear the teacher. Do you still do that? Yeah, I do.
This twister chasing twosome were solo acts until 20 years ago. Then, weather brought them together.
I got a phone call one day from someone who rang me up and said, I hear you like storms. That was him.
Yeah.
He'd been given my number by someone else.
They started chasing weather together and then got married. When Clive retired from his career as a train engineer, the two set their sights on Kansas.
And America was the place to go. Even 30, 40 years ago, I wanted to come to the plains. It was impossible then.
They say central Kansas is the perfect home base for storm chasing.
Why Kansas, not Oklahoma or Texas?
You can get anywhere fast from here. We spend some time out on the roads, maybe a month to 6 weeks every year. The rest of the time we go back to the house and wait for the next storm.
From the ground to the sky, it is go time for Jane and Clive whenever severe weather threatens. But they insist they always keep a safe distance from the danger. For Positively Kansas, I'm Jim Grayway.
Search for Australian Sky and Weather on Facebook if you'd like to keep up with Clive and Jane's day-to-day adventures in Kansas and wherever else severe weather takes them. Another natural phenomenon Kansans encounter when warm weather hits is grasshoppers. They come in big numbers. As Mike Blair shows us in this week's Kansas Wild Edge report, these pesky bugs can be pests, but they're an important food source for other animals.
Grasshoppers, big ones, little ones, millions of them. They're everywhere in late summer, and they can be destructive, eating leaves and crops. But they're also a ready food source for a host of animals. Jumping spiders stalk and catch them, and the powerful hoppers give them a tussle. But one big grasshopper feeds the spider for a week. Orb weavers use their webs to snare flying grasshoppers, and it's easier for them to subdue their meals. Flying insect predators like robber flies snag grasshoppers, piercing them with a sharp beak to suck out body contents. All kinds of birds catch flying and sitting grasshoppers, ranging from tiny perching birds like grasshopper sparrows to agile western kingbirds to wild turkeys foraging in grass to roadrunners to larger raptors like great horned owls. Young great horns must develop critical flight and catch techniques for their normal mouse and rabbit prey, and plentiful grasshoppers help them perfect skills again and again. These training exercises force juvenile owls into daylight fields for easy observation. Usually, owls are active only in darkness, but hunger changes the rules. Migrating Swainson's hawks fly in large kettles, often dropping to catch abundant grasshoppers to fuel their journeys. On the mammal side, coyote pups depend on nutritious grasshoppers to keep from starving. Grasshoppers are always close by, and the pups can easily chase them down to supplement their rodent diet. The grasshoppers are just agile enough to teach pounce and catch abilities needed for larger prey. Around ponds, frogs are always waiting for a stray grasshopper to venture near. The large insects make a substantial meal for predators this size. And of course, fish are always watching the surface for a floating hopper as well. Better yet, kids can use grasshoppers as bait to catch a late summer mess of bluegills. So all in all, grasshoppers aren't so bad after all. I'm Mike Blair for Positively Kansas.
Next week, Mike shows us something in nature that's very rarely seen or captured on video. But you'll have to tune in next week to see what it is. Wichita's had several nicknames through the years: Cowtown, Peerless Princess of the Plains, and the Air Capital. But at one time, people across the country had a less flattering name for the city. A local writer has uncovered several eye-opening details during an historical investigation, as Jim Grayway shows us.
Every city of any size has crime and shady business going on. Wichita is certainly no exception. But writer and historian Joe Stump says the situation now is nothing compared to the good old days.
Well, I think what made it so wild is Wichita was a frontier town at that time. It sounds strange, but Oklahoma at that point wasn't even a state.
Illicit gambling halls, opium dens, crooked cops. The city was a sea of decadence and violence, swarming with hoodlums and hookers.
Wichita had 100 or 1,000 times more violence and corruption than Dodge City ever saw.
Stump says Wichita earned a bad rep right out of the gate. In 1873, only 3 years after becoming a city, newspapers across the Midwest were referring to it as Wicked Wichita, and that was just the beginning.
What I discovered was that there's a pretty big misconception about what really was Wichita's history. I think most people think that Wichita had a very few years as a wild cow town that only lasted 3 or 4 years. And then almost all of that took place, quote, across the river in Delano. The truth is the city itself of Wichita was pretty wide open for at least its first 50 years.
The biggest, fanciest house in town was a brothel located right downtown. The owner-operator was a madam who went by the name Dixie Lee.
And she operated very openly in the city out of a large mansion that sits right where the Garvey Center does today. And she was very well connected politically. She was occasionally arrested or fined by police, but she did operate for at least a decade down there and became so well connected politically that Wichita became known as Dixie Leeville.
Her story is both colorful and tragic, with twists and turns that make it a real page-turner. Also around the same time, Wichita was home to another shady character named Professor Henry Samuels,
who produced what was known as patent medicine back then.
Samuels got rich scamming millions of dollars out of sick Americans from coast to coast with his phony eye drops. Samuels hoodwinked people into believing his miracle medicine would cure anything from tired feet to terminal cancer. His so-called medicine turned out to be nothing but sugar and salt water.
He was one of the wealthiest businessmen in Wichita until the federal government finally sent him to prison.
Another crooked Wichitan was a notorious gangster named Eddie Adams. Adams robbed banks, trains, any place there was a lot of loot. A master of disguise and of escaping from prison, Clever Eddie, as they called him, based his crooked operation out of Wichita for 2 years. Then he was gunned down in a shootout with police in 1921.
As they did back then, they propped his body up in the city morgue, and somewhere between 7,000 and 9,000 people came by to view his dead body.
That is twice as many as showed up to view John Dillinger's body in Chicago when he bit the dust a few years later.
So I mean, this Eddie Adams out-Dillingered Dillinger.
Those are just a few of the stories in Stump's book, Wicked Wichita.
I really wanted people to be, number one, entertained, but also to realize that their hometown is not some boring place in the middle of nowhere. It had a really colorful, lively history. And to me, that just makes it a much more interesting place to live in.
So do you think we're more boring now or not?
Yeah, I think we're more boring now, sadly.
Although, if you think about it, that is probably a good thing. For Positively Kansas, I'm Jim Grayway.
Well, that's a wrap for this week. Email us at positivelykansas@kpts.org if you have a story idea. We're always looking. Until next time, I'm Sierra Scott. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.
Program support provided by the F. Price Kosman Memorial Trust, Entrust Bank trustee, bringing you the Kansas Wild Edge segments on Positively Kansas.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas serves more than 930,000 Kansans in various programs. Independent, member-owned. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas, an independent licensee of Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association, supports KPTS.
Before investing your hard-earned money, make sure your financial advisor understands your objectives. Mark Douglas, CFP, serving our community for over 20 years, providing customized financial solutions that focus on the individual.